This episode is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from NerdWallet. You know that one friend who always finds the best travel deals, picks the right cards, and somehow ends up in first class for the price of coach? How do they do that? Well, Smart Travel is like that friend, but in podcast form. They cover all things travel finance, like which travel cards earn their keep and which are just heavy, shiny metal, and planning group trips that won't ruin your budget or your friendships. So travel smarter and spend less. That's the key with help from NerdWallet. Follow Smart Travel wherever you get your podcasts. Armchair-Explorer is a part of the Voyescape podcast network. Check out all of their shows from around the world at voyescape.com.
At home, mindfulness is an app, a tool to fight the noise. In the wild, peace and calm rule by default, and mindfulness is the path of least resistance. In volatile conditions, it's a means of survival too. Out in the open, my mind is released from the noise. It sways with the trees and flows with the rivers. It blows over snow-tipped mountaintops and down into wide, sunlit valleys, expanding to fill its surroundings. The vistas are bigger, but there is less to know.
Hey guys, welcome to Armchair Explorer. I'm Aaron Miller. I'm a travel writer and your host. And the teaser you just heard then was from a piece written by today's guest, adventurer Jude Kriwald. And we're going to hear a longer extract at the end. But I wanted to start with it because, first of all, I think it's a really powerful piece of writing. I love it. But also because it encapsulates something important this story reveals. And to find out what that is, we're going to travel to the Gola Rainforest of Liberia and Sierra Leone in West Africa on a ride through one of the most remote and underexplored places on the continent. Are you ready? Let's go. So Jude made a short documentary film about this journey. It's called Alone Across Gola. And since we spoke a couple of months ago, it's actually gone on to win a few awards. So congrats, Jude. Well deserved, mate. It's a really well put together film. But I guess more importantly, in some ways, just like that extract you heard, it's got some really powerful insights within it. Things that he learned while he was crossing the Gola Rainforest all alone, which I love. This is a story about courage, what courage means and how to find it. It's about forging your own path through life and through the jungle. And it's also something really brave because this episode is the first time that Jude has spoken publicly about his autism. He was diagnosed a few years ago, and this trip really helped him understand that and also understand the way he felt about nature and adventure and that drive many of us feel to escape the norm. So whether you're neurotypical or divergent, whatever that means, we're all divergent, and that is what's typical if you really think about it. I think this story will inspire you to think about your own relationship with the outdoors and adventure, and maybe inspire that next big trip. So I hope you enjoy it, and you can connect with Jude on Instagram. That's the best place to find him, at Jude Kriwald. Do that. He's a really interesting guy to follow. Check out the link in the show notes at the end of this episode, and it will take you straight there. Give me a shout too. I'm on Instagram at armchair-explorer podcast. Come and hang out. If you like travel and adventure, we are going to get on well, that's for sure. Also, kicking off the newsletter. Haven't done this for a while, but I think it'll be really interesting. And we're going to do some behind the scenes stuff. I'm going to tell some stories that you can't hear anywhere else. And if you sign up, you're actually going to get a copy of a book I wrote a few years ago. It is called The 50 Greatest Wonders of the World. I'm really proud of that. I got to choose all the wonders myself, and hopefully it will inspire some adventures and just be a fun read too. So sign up to the newsletter and get that free ebook as well. But don't worry about that just yet, because this adventure is about to begin, and it starts with the moment that changed Jude's life.
I was backpacking in India when I was 18, and they have a road there which they claim to be the highest motorable road in the world, Kardungla or Kardung Pass. It actually isn't, but it's a good tourist trap to say that it is. I was on a 4x4 tour with a mountain bike strapped to the roof, and we got stuck in basically a traffic jam on what's meant to be the highest road in the world because there was a snowstorm. There were a couple of trucks sliding off this very, very treacherous road with big cliff drops, and we'd been sat there for 2 or 3 hours, and I just thought, we're not going to make it back tonight, and I really don't want to sit here freezing cold. So I took the mountain bike off the roof, cycled the last 2 or 3 kilometers up to the top of the highest road in the world, and then just freewheeled down in my, from 5,500 meters in my Goa trousers and a woolly jumper. I remember coming down and thinking it got really cloudy, and I later learned that I'd actually just got windburn in my eyes.
The Kardung Pass is in the north of the Ladakh range of the Himalayas, and it's about 17,500 feet high, which is crazy. They were the most beautiful mountains he'd ever seen, and he wanted more. He wanted more mountains to freewheel down so fast the wind burned his eyes. So when he got back to England, he started dreaming about how to find them. He read everything he could, he spoke to people, he looked at maps, until finally he put his finger on the Pamir Mountains of Tajikistan in Central Asia, an incredibly remote and starkly beautiful range with wide glacial valleys and peaks rising over 20,000 feet tall. Brutal, breathtaking, and just what he was looking for. The plan at first was simply just to go there, hop on a plane and pedal around. But then he thought, if he was going to do that, well, he might as well just cycle to them instead.
I remember just thinking, well, I'll just point my bike south to the southeast and I'll cycle. And I literally did that. And it wasn't actually too big of a jump, despite having never cycled more than 30 kilometers before. The reason it wasn't too big of a jump is I went gradually, right? I started from Somerset, where my family lived. I spent the first 4 days in England, then the first week in France after that. Then I went through the Alps, then I went to Southern Europe, then Turkey, then Iran. And, by the time I decided to cross the Pamirs in winter, I'd been going for 7-8 months, and I'd really got my eye in, I guess. It was mid-January, and it was minus 31 degrees Celsius inside my tent. I don't know what the outside temperature was. And I had on literally every single piece of clothing I had. So I had my cycling shorts, then I had my thermal leggings, then I had some tracksuit bottoms, then I had my ski trousers, then over the top of that I had some hiking over trousers. And I remember I slept okay that night, and I remember when I would wake up in the middle of the night, a tiny bit cold, and zip my sleeping bag up more if I needed to, just being really satisfied that thinking, yes, I'm cold, but this is just about doable. I was on the top of the Akbaital Pass in the Pamirs, which is sort of 4,600 meters, and I only saw one car go past the previous day. So I knew that I kind of had to make it work. There was no option to sort of stick my thumb out and wait for a ride. That was sort of my introduction to the cold, and where I learned that I loved cold weather. And then for me, the absolute highlight was probably the sort of the pinnacle and maybe arguably the most exciting 30 days of my life was sneaking through Tibet. So for those who don't know, to go through Tibet, you need a Chinese visa, which I had, and you then need a Tibetan permit, which is very hard to get. And at the time, it cost thousands of dollars. You need to go with 3 other people of the same nationality as you. You need to stay in a jeep, and you need to stay on the permitted routes. So it was just not possible for me. So I spent the entire month without going below 4,000 meters altitude. So you're on this vast plateau, which is actually relatively flat. It has these gentle rolling hills, which sometimes go up to 5,500 meters, but they're not sort of tall peaks. So visually stunning because you've got these expansive views. And then every now and then, either I'd know what's coming from my notes, or there would be an unexpected checkpoint. And most of the time I would sort of set up 500 meters beforehand, set up camp, pull over out of sight, get some sleep, set my alarm, and then at 3 a.m. in the morning, bear in mind this was February or March, I think, so it was still minus 20 outside, I'd drag myself out of the tent and sneak through the checkpoints. And some were easier than others. Some of them were ones where you could simply go round on open field almost. Other ones were in deep valleys where I literally had to tiptoe right through the middle with the floodlights on. And I just had the most amazing time because I thought that I really wanted to be there. It was the only way I could get to India. My whole trip, my website was englandtoindia.org. I had to get to India, and I was meant to go through Pakistan, but whilst I was on my way, they changed the visa rules and said you had to get your visa at home, so I couldn't get it. So if I got caught, I'd be deported and I wouldn't make it. So everything was riding on it. And I guess the climax of that trip was waking up on the last day. I didn't know it was going to be my last day in Tibet, but it ended up being so. I woke up at 5,700 meters altitude. I wasn't on a road. I'd pushed my bike up a yak track that some local traders used, with prayer flags at the top and Tibetan scripture written in the cave sides. And I started at 5,500 meters. I went through the last checkpoint at about 5,000 meters, and I knew that was the last checkpoint. And it was this amazing asphalt road that wound down from 5,000 meters down to 500 meters altitude on the border with Nepal. I remember just weaving on this road as it came down through the clouds in a steep valley, and then you come underneath the clouds and you're in sort of the South Asian continent with its jungles and warmth and humidity. And I had Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon playing in my earphones as I was going. It was like something from a movie or something, and I had this whole album playing, just absolutely caning it downhill, not pedaling. And it was like the combination of these 30 days of sneaking around and cycling uphill, and I knew in that moment that I'd made it to India, and it was on the biggest downhill I think you could probably do anywhere in the world on continuous asphalt.
That might just be the coolest place Dark Side of the Moon has ever been played. Jude thought it would take 6 months to get to India. It took the best part of a year in the end. He was chased by packs of wild dogs, held up at gunpoint, he caught typhoid, he met amazing people, he felt the wind burn his eyes again and found the mountains he was looking for. It was, he says, the best thing he ever did. And when he got back, he knew this was it. This was what he wanted to do with his life. He wanted to be an adventurer. He wanted to build his life around that pure joy of exploring the world. And for a time, he did. He led some cycle tours. He tried to set up his own travel business, but none of it stuck. I was surrounded by typical career escalators, he says, with thousands of on-ramps that made it impossible not to get sucked in. He was 20 years old, and slowly, inevitably, the dream he had slipped further and further away.
But if I'm really honest, I think the big struggle was that I didn't really know how to do it. And then life just happened, and I was only 20 years old. And I remember this feeling of a year or two after coming back, it very much felt like, yeah, I'm Jude, and I just did this massive adventure, and that was part of my identity. And I remember after 3 or 4 years thinking, someone had asked me, and I'd say, yeah, I did this thing. And I was like, how long can you keep thinking this is your identity as it slips 4, 5, 6 years into the past? And that was really hard to grapple with. And I think I just sort of suppressed that part of me that really, really wanted to go out there and do it, because I didn't know how.
The happy-go-lucky person that freewheeled down mountains became the person who lay awake each night wondering how he let his dream slip away. And the more his life didn't line up with the person who he was inside, the deeper he cracked, until suddenly 10 years passed and he couldn't take it anymore. He found a new map, dreamed a new dream, and decided to just go.
I chose West Africa because I knew so little about it, because very few Western travelers do go there. And I had these two questions hanging over my head when I looked at, I always go on Google Earth, like many adventurers. Google Earth is my inspiration. And two questions I had in my head were, what's it like to sleep alone deep in the jungle? Because they have some pretty gnarly jungles there. And I wanted to know, as best I could, what is the life of a typical West African villager? What's that like? So, I was never going to spend a month living with people, but I wanted to pass through these places where there's such little information about, the typical West African villager in Guinea or Sierra Leone, Liberia. What's their day-to-day like? What are their concerns? What is their access to media? Even simple things like that. And I'm fascinated by the parts of the world that aren't massively impacted by globalization. Just about everywhere in the world has many, many things in common. I want to know what's life like when you don't have all the same common inputs that we have. How do you value things differently? What does your day-to-day look like as a result of that? And that's really what drove me, was this feeling of, actually, there are some places which are still really underexplored. No, it's unexplored, but let's say places are underexplored, and that pulled me in.
Jude's journey began in Senegal, and the plan was to spend 3 months cycling south from there through Guinea, Sierra Leone, and into Liberia. Finally, after 10 years of talking about it and not doing it, he was out on the open road again. But the deeper he went, the more he realized this wasn't what he was expecting.
The honest truth is that the vast majority of it I didn't love. I found it really hard. Maybe I was naive. I was expecting there to be differences in culture. I'm there to adapt to the culture of the local people. I found it very hard because I didn't realize to quite what extent a lot of remote villagers would have, for example, never ever seen a white person before, and what their reaction might be to that. So, I want to talk about this delicately because I have no criticism to make. I can only say how it was from my personal experience, that you would often ride into a village and a little kid would start chanting, white man, or I learned 5 or 6 different tribal ways of saying this, poto, poto, which comes from Portuguese, because the Portuguese used to be in West Africa. And a little kid pointing is like, whatever, it's not a big deal. But sometimes the entire village would start chanting and pointing as if they'd seen a flying pig. And when it's 36 degrees and you're pulling into a remote village in the Sahel to try and ask if there's anywhere you can find some water, and everyone's pointing and laughing at you, it's hard. That's difficult. And I want to be clear also that wasn't the experience in the majority of villages, but it was an experience I had multiple times every day. And so I struggled to connect.
He never felt threatened or intimidated. Jude's very clear on that. He wasn't made to feel unwelcome. He was just so different, so other. And the questions he had, perhaps because of the vast differences between his life and theirs, had no easy answers, at least ones that could bridge their lives in those brief moments that he was passing through. And so with only 3 weeks left, he decided to take a detour.
When you look at the satellite images of West Africa, you'll see that there is a lot of green. It is mostly thick jungle, rainforest, but there are 2 particularly thick parts in Liberia, which is really underdeveloped. And one of them is the Gola Rainforest on the border of Sierra Leone. And when you look at a map of the Gola Rainforest, it's a few hundred kilometers across and down. And there is a track that goes right through the middle of the rainforest, except for a short section where the track disappears. And I just thought, wow, that track looks absolutely gnarly. That would be, what a great place to cycle. And I couldn't find any records of people online of cycling there before. And I just thought, as I said, I had this question in my mind, what's it like to sleep alone deep in the jungle at night? And I thought this will be a place to answer that question, to really immerse myself in a type of nature that we don't have at home, the rainforest. And I just thought, I'll go for it. I'll go to the last village. And when I get to the last village where the track ends, I will ask, I will look around, I will see, does it look like really, really thick jungle? I'd never been to a jungle before. I don't know how crossable a jungle is on foot, let alone with a 53-kilo bike along my side. And so, I just went for it.
The Gola Rainforest is home to the Kissi, Mende and Gola tribes, and the villages here are some of the most remote in the continent. And this is what Jude had with him. 6 baguettes, 50 biscuits, 4 dinners worth of pasta, no tarmac, no phone signal, no electricity, and no guarantee that he would make it through to the other side. He took the dirt track as far as it would go, heading deeper and deeper into that thick patch of dense green he'd found on the map.
So I got to the last village, called Nyama, and I could just see this wall, a river, and then a wall of jungle in front of me. So the village went up to the edge of the river, and they cleared it, and they had houses, and they were building a new house, had maybe 12 or 15 houses. Then this river, which didn't look too deep, and then just a wall of green like I'd never seen before. And I stopped and I asked the locals, just the guys who were building this house, I didn't know who was in charge. I said, is there a way through to Fiama, which was where the track was meant to begin again in roughly 12 or 15 kilometers? Long story short, they said no. Then they sat me down with some rice and beans because they felt bad for me and they were going to send me back. And then just as I was finishing my rice and beans, the village chief came up to me and said, well, why don't you take these 2 or 3 guys with you? They know the way and they've got machetes so they can help clear the path, because the villagers don't walk on this path in any sort of regularity. And I was quite uncomfortable with that initially. I've never done that before. It made me think of colonial age explorers paying local people to carry all their stuff and they just walk there with nothing on them and say, I did it. But I thought, oh, you know what, if I pay them fairly and they seemed like nice guys who were up for it and wanting to do it, I took my bike, we took all the bags off. I had 5 or 6 bags. Initially, there were 3 guys helping me. Then one of them had to go back halfway. And that's actually where the first of the problems began. So we were working our way through the jungle. They had 2 machetes between them, clearing the undergrowth, arguing about which way the track was. Not me. I was sort of fully in their hands at that point. And as I said, I knew it was roughly south, but I had no idea which way to go. And when one of these guys said he had to go back to keep building this house I was working on, I opened my money bag to pay him. And although I was in Liberia, they use the Sierra Leone currency in that part of Liberia because it's so remote, it's closer, they trade across the border, and Sierra Leone currency is badly inflated, so you have to carry wads of cash. And I guess the other guys maybe saw that I had these wads of cash in my bag, but nothing was said of it. And we started going again, and I never normally let my money bag out of my sight. I normally am always the one who carries it. It's normally attached to my bike. But I was tired, I was exhausted. It was maybe 35 degrees, 95% humidity, absolutely dripping, wringing out my shirt every half hour or so, getting stung by ants, by thorns and so on. Anyway, I noticed that one of these guys kept going ahead with my bike, with my money bag attached to it. And as I learned, you don't really have to go very far in the jungle to quickly be out of sight. And I just felt a bit uneasy, and that's the one bag. It's got my passport in, got my medication, which I have to take every day. I need that bag. Anyway, eventually I caught up with him, and there are 4 buckles on my money bag, and they're obviously always shut. And I got there and 3 of them were open. And I just thought, oh no, this is not good. And I opened the money bag, and I saw that a wad of cash was missing. And at this point, it was just me and this one other guy. And he was stood there with the machete. He was stood there with the knowledge of how to get in and how to get out. And he was stood there, as far as I knew, with my money somewhere on him, but I couldn't see it. So I couldn't sort of go in all guns blazing. So I initially said, hey, I've lost some money, have you seen it? He just shook his head. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to bide my time here, I need to think. The other guy caught up, they stopped, they had a cigarette. I was thinking, what can I do? And I looked down and I just saw this wad of cash sticking out of his pocket. It couldn't have been many places, right? It was in a t-shirt and trousers. And without thinking, I just said, you found my money. Thank you so much. And I leant over, sort of suggested to take it. I couldn't quite reach him because my bike was in the way. He froze. And then the other guy leant round also to look. The other guy had no idea what had happened. And he just plucked the money out of his pocket, handed it to me. And I said, look, I was always going to pay you, but I'll pay you at the end. And so basically what I'd done, I guess, without thinking, was made him think that I thought he hadn't stolen from me. Because if he thought that I'm stood there thinking, this guy's a thief, he's just stolen from me, that means we're in conflict. And I could not afford to be in conflict because I didn't know where I was. He had a machete and he knew the way out. So I just played dumb and I made it sound like I thought he was trying to pay himself early. And it somehow worked. He just didn't even say a word. And that was sort of, I guess, the first half of the jungle trip. A couple of hours later, we got through to this first village and the road south was meant to continue. And as I found out pretty soon after, it didn't quite continue from there. And the next stage of the adventure began.
The jungle was like no place I'd seen before, he says. The air was clear, but I could still only see 20 meters in any direction. Beads of sweat ran down my face and dripped off my chin. He wasn't angry with Kefo, his guide who had tried to take the money. Who am I to say I wouldn't have done the same thing, he says. The scarcity and hardship of rural Liberia had met the unattainable prosperity of the West. Perhaps what happened is just the unavoidable friction of 2 worlds colliding. They scrambled over jungle rivers and hacked through thick undergrowth until finally, exhausted, they reached the tiny settlement of Fayama, a mini oasis in the jungle as he describes it, no bigger than half a football field.
I was expecting the road south to continue from there, and I asked the village chief's son, is this the road? And he said, yeah, this is the road, and I'm just looking at another green wall with a track that disappears into it within 20 meters. And I thought, oh geez, this is not going to be what I thought. And I was worried about my food because I had food for 5 days, and that was banking on me being able to get through, be able to cycle 5, 6, 7 kilometers an hour at least. I ended up doing 5 or 6 kilometers a day. And so early on, my feelings were, okay, just push in. Hopefully the path will appear. You know, it's roughly this way. I could see that I was on an old path. I could tell because the trees were cleared in the sense that there were no old trees there. And basically there used to be a road there. And 20 years ago, Liberia had an awful civil war, and everything just got sort of either abandoned or looted or broken down. And this path just fell into disrepair. So there used to be this jungle path with wooden bridges, and if a tree fell down, someone would come along with a chainsaw and clear the way, and motorbikes could get through. So this path hadn't been used for 20 years, I later found out, abandoned during the war. And when I first started, I remember thinking, okay, you're doing something you've never done before, which is jungle. But I really doubted myself, because my thought was, you think you've prepared, but you also really don't know what the jungle's like. And in terms of my preparations, I had things like waterproof cycling socks that I put on to try and stop ant bites. And I just thought, that's quite a good compromise, but that is not how most people go through the rainforest. And so I quite quickly had this feeling of, oh, okay, this might be a lot harder than I think. But I made the decision, go one day in, go one day deep into the jungle and see how you get on. If you absolutely have to, I can turn around. If I had turned around, I don't know what that would have meant. There wasn't enough food in the village I came from. And my feeling was largely one of excitement to finally be deep in the jungle, but also fear. And quite soon I found a rhythm. It took a good 2 or 3 hours, but I found a rhythm and I thought, I can do this. This is way slower than I thought. But you're moving forward. Just keep moving forward. And I had such relief when I finally set my tent up, because I'd been going, I think maybe 10 hours by that point. And normally wild camping is maybe one of my favorite parts of any cycling trip. You look for a lovely spot, you eat your dinner, you enjoy the view, you can look back on the day's photos if you've got any battery left. I couldn't find a spot big enough to put my tent. So I was stomping around the jungle trying to clear the ground. I did also have a hammock with me, but I hadn't used it yet. And I thought, I want to wait until I'm a bit more comfortable in the jungle before I get the hammock out. And I'd got my tent up, I'd eaten my pasta, and I remember lying in my tent and the chorus of sound which the jungle makes at night, it gets louder at night. You hear the frogs and toads, you hear the birds, there are chimpanzees, you can hear all these things cricketing and croaking that you don't know what they are. And I felt this huge sense of awe and also a little bit of pride. The awe was that, wow, I am totally immersed in the jungle. What a privileged and rare experience for me to be immersed in nature with no sign of mankind anywhere around, as it was 100 years ago, and as it was 1,000 years ago, and as jungles were even longer ago than that, wherever they were. And then I guess the pride was going back to that feeling I had before of, why aren't you out there adventuring? And what's it like to sleep alone in the jungle? And I just thought, well, this is it. And I remember going to sleep with a big smile on my face and sleeping really well that night.
Jude talks a lot about self-reliance. That's what he loves about adventure, having to overcome problems, having to provide basic needs for yourself, food, water, shelter. But there are problems that have to be overcome that day. And in modern life, it's the opposite. The work we do most of the time doesn't immediately benefit us. We get that paycheck at the end of the month. We save up all year and go on that trip at the end of the year. And there's a term that he quotes for that. It's called a delayed return environment, and it leads, so the theory goes, to stress and anxiety and all that stuff. Adventure, Jude says, is like the antidote. It's an immediate return environment. We are immediately rewarded for overcoming our challenges, and that allowed Jude to be intensely focused on the present and enter what he describes as a flow-like state.
So to paint a bit of a picture for you, I was trying to follow this old track. Every 100 meters or so, there'd be a fallen tree where the tree trunk could be anything from 0.5 meter to 2 meters thick that I'd have to climb over with my 53 kilo bike or scramble under if it's sort of high enough off the ground. And if it wasn't a fallen tree, the bridges that there used to be across the jungle ravines, they were all broken. They were all moldy tree trunks, or just collapsed or non-existent, or that would have been taken years ago, and had to find my way through them. And there was something about not just being on my own, but knowing that my phone didn't work, knowing that my satellite receiver really wasn't working too often. It gave me this realization that there's no one to complain to, and there's also just no use complaining, full stop. Something would go wrong, anything would go wrong. I'd cut myself, or part of my bike would break, or I found that all my bread was moldy on day 3. That was a real shocker. And I was aware that something negative had happened, but I didn't feel a sort of a voice in my head, a negative emotion. I would just deal with it, go on to the next thing, move forward. And that feeling of self-reliance was really special for me. And I found myself at one point absolutely bellowing song out into the jungle. And I only realized after an hour, I was like, Jude, you've been singing really loudly for the last hour. And I was hauling my bike on my back at these stages, crossing these bridges. I think I was wringing my shirt out every 30 or 40 minutes, absolutely soaked through. Underwear, trousers, socks, everything soaked just from sweat. But there was nothing to do but get on with it. And I loved that. I was just absolutely in my element.
3 full days from Fayama, Jude carried his bike out of the jungle to the village of Jawaje, where word of his arrival had spread. The entire village came out to greet him. After spending 3 days alone in the jungle, he says, I am overwhelmed by the warm welcome of these strangers and suddenly aware of the deeper connection I've been missing. But he wasn't out of the woods, so to speak, just yet. From Jawaje, it took him 5 more days on broken dirt tracks just to reach a road, squeezing every last bit of strength from his body and mind just to keep going. A huge part of me wants to give up, he says, but I know that I can't. To give up would break me. The pressure is too huge and the stakes too high. The weight of the last 10 years bears down on me as I simply cannot go back to those dark days. This track is my way out and suffering the way through. And then on the end of the 5th day, 15% of his body weight left behind in the jungle. He pushed his bike over that last hill. The road opened out before him and he freewheeled down to the coast. 3 days later, he reached the ocean.
I was broken by that point. It had been so much harder than I thought it'd be. And I remember all the buttons on my shirt were open. I was shooting downhill. I was covered in sweat. The wind was drying me. I got to the bottom. I threw my bike down, threw my shirt off, and ran into the sea. And I remember just floating on my back, feeling weightless, staring up at the empty sky. And I didn't have any profound thoughts. It was just empty. And it was an absence of thoughts, maybe of feelings, of the weight of the bike I'd been carrying disappearing, the weight of the last 10 years of why aren't I adventuring evaporating, the sort of self-doubt disappearing because I'd done what I'd set out to do. You multiply all of that by the fact that I've been really hot and sweaty for 10 days and now I was floating in the cool Atlantic Sea. So you got the physical and the emotional. Yeah, that was a moment I'll never forget. But what I took away from the trip, and I only really realised this once I crashed into the sea at the end, maybe it was the first thought that came to me, that courage isn't really traipsing my way through rainforests or hauling myself up mountain passes, because frankly that's what I love doing. For me, courage was admitting to myself first of all, and then to my friends and my partner Nicola, as I did before I went on this trip, that I want to be an adventurer. And I said that to them. I sort of stood up and said, look, I did this thing 10 years ago. This is how I used to see myself. I've let it slip. This is what really matters to me, and I'm going to have a go of it. I'm going to do this adventure. I'm going to post about it online. I'm going to make this film. I'm going to submit it to film festivals, and we're going to go from there. And that's scary. Doing that is scary because once you admit your dream to people, they can see whether you succeed or whether you fail, how you get on. Are you a quitter? Are you not? You have a dream when you're younger, and you follow it as long as you can, and a lot of people, including myself, let them slip. What I think is really hard is to come back at some point, whether you're in your 30s, 40s, whether you're in your 80s, and say, this is what I want to do. To stick your head above the crowd and say, this is me. I might not be very good at it. I might not be the most famous adventurer. I might not be the gnarliest adventurer, but I want to spend my life adventuring and helping others to do the same. And that for me takes courage, I think.
And it didn't stop there. When Jude got the diagnosis that he was on the spectrum, the easy thing to do would be to hide it. The harder thing, the more courageous thing, would be to tell the world, to put his head above the crowd and say, this is me, this is who I am. Before this episode, he'd done that to his friends and family and the people he loved, but he hadn't done it publicly. So in many ways, this is a kind of coming out for him. Because it was in those hard days alone in the jungle that all of this began to make sense. Away from the noise and expectations of a confusing world, despite the hardships he endured, he found peace. And within that peace, self-reliance. And within that self-reliance, the courage to be himself. So to finish the episode, here's Jude reading something he wrote about this. And I think it's beautiful and maybe hopefully helpful to all of us. Because no matter where we are on the spectrum or mental health, and let's be honest, all of us are going through something, nature is the great healer. And there are adventures everywhere if you have the courage to stand up and dare to find them.
My mind is noisy. Like a stoner with the munchies, it indiscriminately chews on any words or numbers it can feed itself. At dinner, I read the back of a ketchup bottle 3 times over, absorbing its nutritional content, memorizing its free phone number, and wondering how many lines of the barcode you'd have to change before it's scanned as something else. I analyze the small print on passing billboards. The terms and conditions state new customers only, and promotion ends on March 31st. See website for details. Loud and useless, the words pile up inside my head like pieces of worthless junk that I hang on to in case they're needed one day that will never come. There is no filter, and the stream never ends. Despite all this, there is a place where the noise subsides, where my mind exhales. At home, mindfulness is an app, a tool to fight the noise. In the wild, peace and calm rule by default, and mindfulness is the path of least resistance. In volatile conditions, it's a means of survival too. Out in the open, my mind is released from the noise. It sways with the trees and flows with the rivers. It blows over snow-tipped mountaintops and down into wide, sunlit valleys, expanding to fill its surroundings. The vistas are bigger, but there is less to know. At night, I stare in silence as the campfire washes hues of orange and yellow across my face. There is nothing to ponder beyond the form of the flickering embers, the scent of the smoky air, and the gentle whisper of the wind on my ears. In nature, there are no artificial rules or etiquettes to learn, and no flowcharts for social navigation. Autism isn't defined by a single trait, but nearly every autistic person knows the discomfort and exhaustion of trying to fit into a world built for neurotypicals. Smiling on cue, reminding myself to make eye contact when speaking, and pretending I'm fine as bright lights burn my eyes and loud voices exhaust my ears. Out of place, I may be, but powerless I am not, and eventually something has to give. I'm tired of covering the parts of me I'm able to hide and finding excuses for those that I cannot. I am autistic. Exactly what that means for me and those around me, I'm still learning, but I do know this. Alone and in the wild, I am beautifully weird and joyously free. It's not that my rituals and quirks fit in better, they simply exist, unobserved. The road cares not, and the sun shines equally on all. In nature, I find reprieve. Alone, I find myself.
Thank you, Jude. Wasn't that beautiful, by the way? I absolutely love that. And if you do too, go ahead and connect with Jude. The film he made is currently doing the rounds on the festival circuit, so it's not out quite yet, but stay tuned. It's coming out soon and well worth a look. Jude is also just a really cool, inspiring guy to follow on Instagram. And who knows where his next adventure will take him, but for sure, it's going to be fun to follow along. So go and follow him right now, drop him a line, and let him know what you think of this story. @Jude Kriwald is the handle, and the link is in the show notes. And thank you so much to all you guys too for listening and continuing to support the show. It means the world to me. And I would love to hear from you too. @armchair-explorer podcast is the Instagram, and armchair-explorer.com is where you can sign up for that newsletter. Get my book for free. 50 Greatest Wonders of the World. Lots of inspiration in there. I'm really proud of that book and really proud to share it with you too. So hopefully you will enjoy that. Go in there and sign up for the newsletter. And hit that subscribe button too and follow the show. If you don't and you miss a few episodes, the evil algorithm will kick us off your feed, which would be very sad. So until next time, tell the world what adventure you want to go on. And if you can, find the courage to make it happen. You won't regret it. Because the more we look for wonder in the world, the more the wonder of the world becomes a part of who we are. Dare to be truly alive. Armchair Explorer is produced by Armchair Productions. Find our other shows at armchair-productions.com. I'm Aaron Miller. I wrote and presented the show. Charles Tyree did the audio editing and sound design, and Jason Patton is our lead producer. I'll see you next time.
Quick question. Do you want travel tips from people who have actually been there?
Our show is co-hosted by Tim Johnson, an award-winning travel journalist who's been to more than 145 countries around the world. And I'm David Brody, the other co-host who's been travel podcasting for 20 years while traveling to 50-plus countries around the world.
In about 10 or 20 minutes per show, we break down a destination with the kind of insight you usually only get from long guidebooks or hours of research.
So if you want expert advice, zero fluff, and travel inspiration that you can actually use, search for Travel in 10 wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can also find us at voyescape.com.
Hi, I'm Pauline Fromer, host of the Fromer's Travel Podcast. We post new episodes weekly, detailing the kinds of money-saving tips and cultural insights that will make your trips richer without making you significantly poorer. We do so by interviewing real travel experts like TV host Samantha Brown, Fromer's authors from around the globe, and such public figures as Free Solo's Alex Honnold. It's a fun travel party. I hope you can join us.